Let me tell you something most people missed. There was a chair at the table that morning, set precisely where it always was. Positioned the way palace staff position everything, with the kind of quiet exactness that communicates before a single word is spoken, that this is a serious room. The chair was empty. Not because someone was late. Not because a schedule had shifted. The chair was empty because King Charles had made a decision before anyone else arrived. And that decision meant the person expected to sit in it was no longer part of the conversation. Nobody acknowledged the chair. That was the protocol. You don't name what the king has already decided not to name. But everyone in that room understood what an empty chair at that table means. It means the discussion is already closed. It means the answer has already been given, not with words but with absence. And in rooms like that one, absence speaks louder than anything else. The chair wasn't long empty, but what it said changed everything. So who was supposed to be sitting there? That is the question everyone inside those walls already knew the answer to. And when the realization settled, not gradually but all at once, the way cold water arrives, the reaction moved through the room in a single shared exhale. Because this wasn't a scheduling decision. It wasn't an administrative oversight corrected before it became embarrassing. King Charles does not leave chairs empty by accident. Every detail of those mornings is managed with the kind of precision that only institutions with centuries of practice achieve. The empty chair was a statement. Camilla's family had submitted a request, carefully worded, formally presented, outlining 3 things they believed the crown owed them: an expanded ceremonial presence, access tied to the income of royal estates, and a quiet voice in how the monarchy's legacy gets shaped and passed on. They had expected to be in that room to discuss it. You might hear that and think, what's the big deal? The big deal is this. The monarchy runs on one thing above all else. Trust. Public, earned, unbroken trust. And the most dangerous part wasn't what they asked for. It was how certain they were that the answer would go their way. There is a line inside every institution like this one. It doesn't appear in any charter. No aide will name it in a briefing. No protocol document defines it. But it exists, as real and as load-bearing as the walls of the buildings where these conversations happen, and everyone who operates inside those buildings knows exactly where it sits. It is the line between family and function. Between being close to the crown and having a claim on it. Power doesn't collapse loudly. It erodes quietly. It erodes in small concessions that feel reasonable the first time. In access extended once that becomes assumed permanent. In the slow, incremental drift from what someone is given toward what they begin to believe they deserve. And then one morning someone submits a request that crosses the line so cleanly, so confidently, that the room goes still. Insiders had been watching this drift for some time. Not with alarm. Not yet. With the careful, practiced attention of people who are paid to notice the difference between a guest settling comfortably into their chair and a guest who has quietly decided the chair belongs to them. Lines that were once respected were already being tested. And not quietly enough. Here is what people forget about King Charles. Before the crown. Before the ceremonies and the state visits and the particular weight that settles on a person the moment they stop being heir and become sovereign, before all of that there was a man who waited. For decades. In a way that most people who have not experienced it cannot fully imagine. You don't emerge from that kind of waiting unchanged. You learn things in it that people who arrive at power quickly never have to learn. You learn what sustained pressure feels like. Not the sharp, manageable pressure of a crisis, but the slow, permanent pressure of existing inside a role that is always watching you, always measuring you, always calculating the distance between who you are and who the institution requires you to be. King Charles knows what it costs when the institution bends for the wrong reason. He has lived near enough to that cost to feel it. He carries that knowledge the way you carry an understanding that arrives through experience rather than instruction. Quietly, permanently, present in every room where the easier choice and the right choice are not the same thing. When that chair sat empty and the room registered what it meant, something had already been settled inside him. Long before that morning. This wasn't about one request. It was about every request that would follow if he said yes. The advisors had a prediction. Not stated openly. Palace advisors rarely state predictions openly because a prediction named is a prediction that can be wrong, and in rooms like that one, being wrong carries a cost that outlasts the moment. But the expectation was shared and quiet and confident. A negotiation. A softened version of the ask. Something that allowed everyone to step back from the table without a clear winner, which in palace terms is often the most coveted outcome of all. Requests like this one, in the long institutional experience of the people whose job it is to manage them, do not typically end in hard refusals. They are shaped, redirected, given a different form that preserves the relationship while reducing the concession to something manageable. People often mistake silence for uncertainty. They see a king who has not yet spoken and read the pause as an open door, as space still being made, as a man still deciding. King Charles sat at the head of that table the way he always sits, so straight, giving nothing away. The advisors exchanged glances. They prepared for a conversation they were certain was coming. But this silence wasn't hesitation. It was the kind of silence that lives on the other side of a decision already made. 4 days passed. No statement. No backchannel signal sent through the quiet, informal network that exists inside every institution for the specific purpose of softening what is coming before it arrives. The kind of signal that says, in language that is never spoken directly, something is in motion, be patient, the answer is finding its shape. King Charles sent nothing. The press, who read the palace the way navigators read weather, constantly, professionally, always calculating what the current data suggests about what is coming next, noticed only that there was nothing to read. No briefings. No unnamed sources speaking carefully to trusted journalists. No managed preview of a position designed to prepare the ground before the official word arrives. Outside, speculation moved into the space that silence creates. Commentators offered theories. Op-eds appeared. The familiar cycle of assumption and counter-assumption that always surrounds an unexplained pause in royal communication. Inside, the tension moved differently. More slowly. Through people who knew about the request and understood what the silence might mean, or might not mean. Who were watching a king known for measured responses give no response at all. And the longer King Charles said nothing, the more certain some people became. And that certainty would cost them. Here is the thing about silence when it belongs to someone with genuine power. Most people cannot read it. Not accurately. They project onto it. They hear inside it what they need to hear because the alternative, sitting with the true uncertainty of not knowing what a powerful person has decided, is a deeply uncomfortable place to remain. So the mind resolves the discomfort the only way it knows how. With assumption. Quiet clarification requests began to arrive. Politely framed. Carefully worded. Questions about process and timeline. The kind of questions a person asks when they believe the larger answer is already moving in their direction. When the question is no longer whether they will receive what they want. Only when. A gentle push. Nothing that could be named directly as pressure. But pressure nonetheless. Sometimes people don't overreach because they are bold. They overreach because they genuinely believe the door is standing open. Because they have spent enough time inside silence to have convinced themselves that the absence of a refusal is the presence of an invitation. They began, quietly, visibly, to move as though the answer had already arrived. And that assumption was the exact moment everything turned against them. The answer came on a Wednesday morning. No press conference. No statement released to the media. No carefully staged setting designed to signal the weight of the moment through its surroundings. The palace did not brief journalists in advance. No reporter received a quiet call the night before to prepare their editors for what was coming. The communication was internal. Delivered through the proper channel, in the precise format, with the kind of language that carries inside it, without needing to say so, that the conversation is complete. No expanded ceremonial presence. No financial alignment with royal estates. No role, formal or informal, in legacy decisions that belong to the crown. No, not softened. Not reframed into a modified version that preserved the appearance of consideration. Not dressed in the words of further review or ongoing dialogue, the language institutions use when they wish to delay without refusing. King Charles used none of those words. Because here is what a refusal without explanation communicates, to anyone who understands how power speaks inside institutions like this one. An explanation would suggest the request was close enough to legitimate that it deserved a response to its reasoning. It would imply that the logic was the problem, that different logic might produce a different answer. King Charles offered no such implication. There was no explanation attached. And somehow, that made it even louder. What followed was not as seen. There was no confrontation in a corridor. No raised voice that carried through the walls to the staff on the other side. No visible moment of rupture that a journalist could name and a headline could carry. The palace does not produce those moments, not because the people inside it do not feel things deeply, but because the institution runs on a long-held agreement that what is felt and what is shown belong to different categories entirely. But felt it was. Disappointment moves quietly in rooms like these. It sits in the careful, slightly too precise way someone sets down a cup they no longer want. In the half-second delay before a response that would, in ordinary circumstances, come without thought. in the particular quality of a room after everyone in it arrives at the same moment, at the same understanding. The conversation they had been preparing for was not going to happen. What hurt wasn't the refusal. It was the thing underneath the refusal. The realization that the confidence they had carried through days of silence was not reading the room correctly. It was wishful thinking that had learned to carry itself like certainty. They had misunderstood something fundamental. And now they couldn't undo it. Can I be honest with you? This story isn't really about a chair. It isn't about one request or one family's ambition, or even one king's decision on one Wednesday in a palace most of us will never enter. It's about something far older than any of that. Real power, the kind that holds when everything around it is pressing and shifting and testing, does not expand to accommodate the personal comfort of those who stand nearest to it. It holds its line, not because the person holding it is cold, but because they understand something that proximity makes extraordinarily easy to forget. Proximity is not entitlement. Access is not ownership. Being close to something that belongs to the public does not make it yours. The institutions that endure are the ones where someone, eventually, remembers that. King Charles remembered. And the question that nobody inside that building is asking aloud, the one that lives in the space where an explanation should have been, is whether the people who submitted that request have learned it yet. Because this kind of decision doesn't end when it's made. It waits, quietly, for the moment the consequences finally catch up.